Hi students, welcome to the last theoretical session of solutions chapter in which we will be discussing abnormal molar masses obtained from colligative properties. Abnormal molar masses obtained from colligative properties. If you remember the last two sessions, sessions 7 and 8, I have clearly described the four colligative properties: relative lowering of vapor pressure, elevation in boiling point, depression in freezing point, osmotic pressure. I have mentioned that the value of the colligative property depends only on the number of particles of the solute, not on the nature of the solute. Then second very important thing I mentioned to you is this determination of colligative property by dissolving any non-volatile solid solute. By the way, these are the properties of dilute solutions of non-volatile solid solute. So, by dissolving any non-volatile solid solute into suitable solvent and determine the colligative property value for that particular solution, you will be able to determine experimentally the molar mass of that solution. Now, if molar mass of that solute. Now, if it is an unknown solute, you are finding its molar mass. If it is a known solute, you are verifying its molar mass. Likewise, for determination as well as verification of molar masses of solutes, colligative properties will be highly useful. And I have clearly given you the relation between molar mass and any colligative property that we have, all the four colligative properties that we have, and in all the four formulae which I was summarizing in the last session at the previous end of last session, you could notice that molar mass is inversely proportional to every colligative property. Try to keep those formulae at your fingertips. Now, if this molar mass value which you have determined using colligative properties has to be reliable, has to be trustworthy, has to be accurate, has to be considerable, then there are two conditions. One, the solution must be highly dilute. The concentration of the solution must be very low. Why? See, when the concentration is high, the solute particles will be interacting with each other as much as they interact with the solvent. Whereas if it is dilute, they will be very far away from each other, so they will be interacting only with the solvent. Whereas at high concentration, they will be interacting with each other. When they interact with each other, the nature of solute also plays a prominent role in determining colligative property. Then it will be against the very definition of colligative property. So, it must be dilute solutions. Point number one to be noted. Number two, very important. It should neither undergo dissociation in that solvent, nor should it undergo association in that solvent. That means, it should not break into more than one particles when you dissolve in the solvent, or it should not join, the 2-3 particles joining becoming one particle, that association also should not happen. Now you see, this is in our hands. This is at our discretion. I prepare a dilute solution, I decide to prepare a dilute solution and I do it. Whereas, whether the given solute should undergo dissociation or association in the solvent or not depends on the chemical nature of that solute, not in our hands. And majority of the solutes do undergo dissociation and few of the solutes do undergo association based on the kind of solvent you have supplied. Now, what is the problem if it undergoes association or dissociation? That let us understand. So, accordingly, I can categorize the solutes into 3 types. First, the non-electrolytes. Second, the electrolytes, the substances which undergo dissociation in the solution. Third, the substances which undergo association in the solution. So, I repeat, I am taking any non-volatile solid solute and preparing a dilute solution and determining the molar mass of that dilute solution after determining the colligative property and relating it with the molar mass. Right? Through determination of colligative property, if I am calculating molar mass of that solute, then we have got three categories. One, that give, I can at the outset can say two categories. One, that will get exactly accurate molar masses, reliable molar masses, normal molar masses. Or two, the ones which give abnormal molar masses, inaccurate molar masses, wrong molar masses than expected from the theory. Now, that wrong might be two types, right? Less than expected and more than expected. So this is the category where you get molar mass less than expected. This is the category where you get molar mass more than expected. Understood now? Now, what are non-electrolytes? Take glucose, take sugar, take urea. These are the substances which in any solvent cannot either break or join. That's why, say, if I am preparing 1 mole per liter solution of glucose, I will be getting 1 mole of particles per liter, that's all. Means 6.023 into 10 power 23 particles independently present in that solution, that's all. Not more, not less. Accordingly, if I determine colligative property, the colligative property will come corresponding to 1 mole particles, because you know in every colligative property, if you remember, RLVP is equal to mole fraction of solute, delta TB is directly proportional to molality, delta TF is directly proportional to molality, and pi is directly proportional to molarity. So every colligative property depends on the number of particles of solute as per this definition of these concentration terms. Now you will get a colligative property relative to exactly 1 mole particles only. As a result, when you calculate molar mass, you will get molar mass related to that only. So if you calculate for glucose, you will get 180 only. If you calculate for sugar, you will get 342 only. If you calculate for urea, you will get 60 only, which is theoretically expected values of their molar masses. So for non-electrolytes, we get normal molar masses because they neither undergo dissociation nor undergo association in the solution. Am I clear? Am I too much spoon feeding? I'll rush up, no issues. Now moving on to dissociation. This is the problem with these videos. I assume something and I take answer for myself and I conclude and I proceed accordingly. If there are children, I could at least see their reactions. Okay, however, let me go in my own pace, keeping average attention of students. Dissociation. Now, what is the problem if it dissociates? See, if it dissociates, number of particles in the solution, number of particles of solute in the solution will be more than expected. When the number of particles are more than expected, every colligative property is directly proportional to number of particles, right? So, value of colligative property will be more than expected. When the value of colligative property is more than expected, we already know that colligative property is inversely proportional to molar mass, so its molar mass will be less than expected. That means you will get false negative values. You will get lower values of molar mass than expected from the theory. Similarly, if it undergoes association, that means two particles becoming one. Dissociation means one particle becoming 2 or 3 or 4. Similarly, association means 1 or 2 or 3 particles becoming, 2 or 3 or 4 particles becoming 1. Then what happens? Number of particles in the solution will be less than expected. Means if I prepare 1 mole per liter solution, Do I get 1 mole particles in the solution? No. Say for example, 2 particles are associating to become 1. Then if I dissolve 1 mole of solute, I will be getting only half mole of the particles in the solution. Likewise, it will be less than expected. When number of particles are less than expected, value of colligative property will be less than expected, and as a result, molar mass comes more than expected. That means you will get a false positive molar mass, larger molar mass than expected. Let me illustrate it with one example for each. Say, I am dissolving potassium chloride in water. I am adding 1 mole per liter of potassium chloride. Per liter of water, I have added 1 mole of potassium chloride. So I expect 6.023 into 10 power 23 independent particles. And that will happen in case of glucose, urea, sugar, etc. Whereas in case of potassium chloride, what happens? It breaks into 2 independent particles called aqueous potassium cation and aqueous chloride anion. As a result, there is every chance I end up getting 2 mole particles. There is every chance I end up getting 2 mole particles. Now, when the number of particles have become double, value of colligative property will be double than the expected. When value of colligative property is double, molar mass comes half to the expected. For example, potassium chloride molar mass, if you want to calculate, 39 for potassium plus 35.5 for chlorine. So total you will get 9, 5, 14. Okay, 74.5. This is the molar mass of potassium chloride. Now, we know it theoretically. Now I am trying to verify it using colligative properties method, let us say. Then, when I dissolve potassium chloride in water, I will get 2 moles of particles for every mole of particles. Suppose if I got it, then what happens? Potassium chloride, I am getting 2 moles of particles. As a result, colligative property comes double the expected. As a result, molar mass of KCl comes 74.5 by 2, which will be 2 3s are 6, 2 7s are 37.25. You will end up getting. Is that clear? Is that clear? So, you are getting a false negative result. Now, I will add a little thing to your knowledge and then I will go to the next one. That is, again, theoretically when you are calculating, this might happen. But frankly, at certain concentrations, there are chances you may get 38.9 or you may get 43, you may get 52, whatever. Anyways, less than 74.5. Then you may ask me, sir, the number of particles is becoming double. When number of particles becomes double, value of colligative property should become double. Then molar mass should become half exactly. So we should get 37.25 only, Why are we getting 38.9, 43, 52, whatever the values? The answer is simple. We discussed this in electrochemistry also. That it depends on the concentration. When concentration is relatively high, again, that's why I told you it must be dilute. When the concentration is relatively high, because of interionic interactions, some of the KCl units might remain KCl only without breaking into independent ions. That means for 1 mole, exactly 2 mole of particles may or may not come. If it is slightly less than 2 moles, automatically the molar mass will be slightly more than 37.25. So it again depends on the concentration. So at highly dilute concentrations, what happens? Complete dissociation might happen. That means 1 mole will give exactly 2 moles, then you may get exactly 37.25. But otherwise it matters. Please understand that. Now come here. Suppose I am dissolving acetic acid into benzene. Acetic acid in water will belong to this category. It might undergo dissociation because acetic acid is an acid and ionizes to produce H plus ions. Whereas in benzene solvent, acetic acid undergoes association, which is dimerization. Dimerization means 2 molecules becoming 1, and that is something like this. CH3C double bond OOH, CH3C double bond OOH. I took the 2 particles of acetic acid in a convenient orientation to show you. And again, for this dimerization, intermolecular hydrogen bonding is the responsible factor. So there will be intermolecular hydrogen bonding between electropositive hydrogen of one acetic acid molecule and electronegative carbonyl oxygen of the other. As a result, two molecules are becoming one. So what happens? The number of particles, say suppose I dissolve 1 mole per liter, I end up getting only half mole of particles. When number of particles are half, okay, value of colligative property becomes half. As a result, molar mass becomes double. Add and see, you will get molar mass of acetic acid as 60, normal one. But if you determine by colligative properties method, you end up getting 120, double the expected value. Again here, it depends on the concentration and other factors whether the association happens 100% or not. Please understand. If dissociation or association is 100%, then the abnormality also will be as expected. Exactly double or exactly 3 times or exactly 4 times, exactly half or exactly 1/3 or exactly 1/4. I'm telling the reverse. Exactly double or exactly 3 times or exactly 4 times, exactly half or exactly 1/3 or exactly 1/4 you will get if dissociation and dissociation are 100%. But sometimes all the molecules may not involve in association. All the molecules may not involve in dissociation. That's why anything may happen. Now, the question is, the biggest question here is, can we let this happen simply? The answer is absolutely no, we can't let this happen. That means we need some correction in the properties of formula of colligative properties such that despite the association or dissociation, I should end up getting the correct molecular mass. For that, we need a correction factor, and that correction factor we are going to discuss now. Is that clear? So to conclude, molecular masses determined from colligative properties method will come as expected, that is normal molecular masses, if the solute is non-electrolyte, neither undergoes association nor undergoes dissociation in the solvent. Whereas if it undergoes dissociation, you will get lesser molar mass than expected, because number of particles will be more than expected, colligative property will be more than expected, and colligative property is inversely proportional to molar mass. Whereas if it undergoes association, you will get more molar mass than expected. Such molar masses obtained are called abnormal molar masses. That's why all the colligative properties need a correction factor so that the molar masses obtained will be correct. That correction factor is Van't Hoff factor. We will be understanding Van't Hoff factor now. Okay. The scientist Van't Hoff, whom I introduced yesterday when I was talking about osmotic pressure, Van't Hoff law, somewhere around 1880s, he observed this abnormality in molar masses obtained from colligative properties and suggested a mathematical correction for these colligative properties, such that if this mathematical correction is incorporated into the formula of colligative properties, we should end up getting the same value as expected theoretically despite the association or dissociation, so that the molar mass also comes accurately. Okay, and Van't Hoff factor I basically can be defined as normal molar mass, that is expected molar mass. Like for KCl it was supposed to be 74.5, for acetic acid it was supposed to be 60, and so on and so forth. Normal molar mass or expected molar mass divided by observed molar mass, the molar mass observed from colligative properties. Say for example, I was telling for KCl it might come 37.25, for acetic acid in benzene it might come 120, etc. So that observed molar mass. So normal molar mass divided by observed molar mass. Okay. Now you know very well, molar mass is inversely proportional to the colligative properties. That's why you see, Because molar mass is inversely proportional to the colligative property, I can reverse this in terms of, if I express it in terms of colligative property, it becomes observed value of colligative property divided by normal value of colligative property. Now, because if I have to express it in terms of number of particles, then you know very well the value of colligative property and number of particles are directly proportional. Hence, number of particles and molar mass will be inversely proportional. That's why you can say number of particles. When do you get observed value of colligative property? When dissociation or association happens. So, number of particles after association or dissociation divided by number of particles before association or dissociation. Means, please understand, when there is association or dissociation, the value of colligative property will be abnormal, that is observed, directly proportional. Whereas when there is no association or dissociation, the value will be normal, directly proportional. That's why means the same ratio can be expressed in three different perspectives. From the perspective of molar masses, from the perspective of colligative property values, or from the perspective of number of particles. Is that clear? Now, from any perspective you take, I am giving you the illustration now. From any perspective you take, same KCl and acetic acid in benzene example we will go. Then KCl is becoming K plus and Cl minus. Right? Now, if there were 100% dissociation, assuming there was 100% dissociation, please understand. Assuming there was 100% dissociation, each KCl particle should have become how many particles? 2. So tell me, number of particles after association and association would have been 2. Number of particles before dissociation will be 1. As a result, I value will be 2. Correct? Similarly, in term, that is from this formula perspective. From this formula perspective, if I speak, if there is no association or dissociation, the normal molar mass would have been 74.5. Whereas if this happens exactly with 100% dissociation, we end up getting 37.25. That means I value comes out to be 2. So the I value for KCl, which is undergoing 100% dissociation, which is true only under high, very good dilution, is observed to be 2. Clear? Will be obtained 2. Similarly, 2 moles of acetic acid in benzene solvent is becoming a dimer, means single molecule, that is dimer of acetic acid. Now, what is happening? Because of association, the number of particles is 1. Before association, the number of particles would have been 2. As a result, the I value will be 0.5. Or in terms of molar masses you want to speak, the normal molar mass of acetic acid would have been 60. But because of this, assuming 100% association again, assuming 100% association, if this association has happened, and 100% association means, please understand, say there are billion molecules. All the billion enter into association such that the number of molecules become half a billion exactly. Whereas less than 100% association, what does that mean? Out of billion, maybe 3/4 of a billion are involved in association, 1/4 are remaining independent. Then what do you understand? The number of particles will be 3/4 of them would have combined with each other and would have become half of it. So half of the 3/4 and remaining 1/4 is remaining 1/4. So half of the 3/4 plus 1/4 will be the remaining number of particles there. That is the meaning of 100% or less than 100% association. Having said that, so having 100% association, normal molecular mass would have been 60, but you would have got 120 because of this association. As a result, you are getting the I value 0.5. So from either this perspective or from this perspective, I value can be understood. Clear? Now, what Van 't Hoff says is, the formula of RLVP must be P naught minus P by P naught is equal to I into XB. Clear? The formula of delta TB must be I into KB into M. The formula of delta TF must be I into KF into M. The formula of pi must be I into MRT. Means all the four colligative properties must be multiplied by Van 't Hoff factor. Now, as I already explained you here, the Van 't Hoff factor value depends on the concentration of the solution. I can give you a quick, very interesting experimental instance to understand that. See, for sodium chloride, which you know very well dissociates into Na plus and Cl minus, means each mole of sodium chloride in the solution should give 2 moles of the particles, 1 mole of cations and 1 mole of anions. Now it was noticed that at a concentration of 0.1 molal, sodium chloride Van 't Hoff factor was observed to be 1.87. At a concentration of 0.01 molal, it was observed to be 1.94. At a concentration of 0.001 molal, it was observed to be 1.97. Means please observe, as the concentration is decreasing, as the solution is becoming more and more dilute, Van 't Hoff factor is approaching 2. It is almost 2 here if you notice. So Van 't Hoff factor is almost approaching 2. However, even after a fairly large concentration, you can notice the value is 1.87 because it is a strong electrolyte. So strong electrolytes are theoretically supposed to undergo 100% dissociation. All the salts are strong electrolytes, by the way. That's why. But it is the interionic interactions that might be stopping them from attaining the Van 't Hoff factor value of 2. But as you notice, as the dilution increases, the Van 't Hoff factor is approaching 2. At very dilute solution might exhibit a Van 't Hoff factor exactly 2 because it might have undergone 100% dissociation. Is that clear? Please make this point, note this point, because very large, the numericals which might appear very large can be solved just like that, looking at the options in entrances especially, if this concept is very clear in your mind. Okay, but otherwise, practically it is that no electrolyte, whether it is strong electrolyte or weak electrolyte, no electrolyte would undergo 100% dissociation. By the way, dissociation examples are more popular than the association examples. And no electrolyte would undergo 100% dissociation. That's why Van 't Hoff factor will not be exactly as we expect from the dissociation formula or dissociation equation. However, in case of strong electrolytes, what facility do we have? Though it will not be 100% dissociating, it will be undergoing a large extent dissociation. As a result, Van 't Hoff factor will be very close to the expected. Say for example, let me make some space here. Say for example, calcium chloride you take. It dissociates into 1 mole of calcium cation and 2 moles of chloride anions. That means every 1 mole of particles must be should become 1 mole cations and 2 mole anions. So totally 3 moles of particles you are supposed to get. That means the number of particles is supposed to be tripled. So number of particles after dissociation will be 3, number of particles before dissociation will be 1, 3 by 1 must be 3 if it undergoes 100% dissociation. Similarly, say for example, you take a salt like calcium phosphate, Ca3PO4 taken twice. You can notice there are 3 moles of cations and 2 moles of anions. So 3 moles of Ca2 plus ions and 2 moles of PO4 2 minus ions will be formed. That means every 1 mole of calcium phosphate becomes 3 moles of calcium cations and 2 moles of phosphate anions, so totally 5 moles. That means Van 't Hoff factor should come 5. Here Van 't Hoff factor should come 3 if there is 100% dissociation. But no doubt practically 100% dissociation is impossible. However, because we know salts are strong electrolytes, we can confidently tell that the value will be, for any concentration for that matter, value will be very close to 3. For any concentration for that matter, in case of calcium phosphate, value of I, Van't Hoff factor will be very close to 5. Same thing we cannot say for weak electrolytes. It could be, see, if the expected Van't Hoff factor is 5, it may be 2.5 or 2 or 1.5 because they undergo very weak dissociation. Clear? That's why if while solving the questions in entrances, if options are quite far away from each other and only one option appears to be closest to 100% dissociation, if the given electrolyte is a strong electrolyte, then without doing the calculation, you can just choose that option. You will get illustrations in the same session, don't worry. Hope you have understood abnormal molar masses, you have understood meaning of Van't Hoff factor, and you have understood the correction, and you have understood dependence of Van't Hoff factor on the concentration of the solution. If these three aspects are clear, then let us go to the next important technical aspects of Van't Hoff factor. Okay. See, if the degree of dissociation is 1, that is if the dissociation is 100%, then Van't Hoff factor can be obtained theoretically simply. Like it will be 2 for KCl, 2 for NaCl, 3 for calcium chloride, 5 for calcium phosphate, as I just gave you. So just understanding each mole of that solute gives how many moles of particles after dissociation, you can tell the Van't Hoff factor if it is 100% dissociation. But I told you practically no solute undergoes 100% dissociation. That's why we are deriving a relation between degree of dissociation alpha and Van't Hoff factor I. We have already defined Van't Hoff factor I. Let us define alpha, though I know that you know it. Okay. Degree of dissociation or ionization. I gave you the difference between dissociation and ionization in the beginning of this chapter, if you remember, is number of particles dissociated divided by total number of particles added to solution. Number of particles dissociated divided by total number of particles added to solution is called alpha. It can be expressed as fraction as well as percentage. If you want percentage, multiply it by 100, that's simple. Now, if how many other particles we have added, if all of them dissociate, that is called 100% dissociation I was talking about, then alpha comes out to be 1. If not, alpha will be less than 1. So the highest value of alpha will be equal to 1. And you know very well, for all strong electrolytes, alpha is supposed to be 1. But because of intraionic interactions, it is coming slightly less than 1, but it will be very close to 1, 0.8 and above generally. Whereas for weak electrolytes, it might start from 0.01 also, who knows. So huge difference will be there. That is what, that fundamental idea makes answering our entrance questions very easy in this case. You will understand as we proceed. However, this is alpha, right? Now, we are trying to derive a relation between degree of dissociation alpha and Van't Hoff factor. For that, let me assume that there is an electrolyte A. Simply I am just taking it as A. And A was existing as AN, means in each molecule of A there are n particles, let us say, just for example. In each molecule of N there are n particles. Like in KCl there are 2 particles, in calcium chloride there are 3 particles, in calcium phosphate there are 5 particles, likewise there are n particles. Now what do you mean by dissociation? The n particles are becoming independent. N particles are becoming independent. So AN has become Na. So it has broken into individual particles. Clear? So the forward process is called dissociation. And at some point, if the concentration increases or whatever the case might be, they may combine, associate with each other and may become this. So there will be equilibrium, right? Now you see, attaining equilibrium means process. See, again, the perspective of equilibrium should be clear for you by now, but let me give you in this context. Attainment of equilibrium means the process has stopped. It is happening, but there is no result, so process has stopped. Now, process may stop after 90% of dissociation, or process may stop after 70% of dissociation, or process may stop after 20% of dissociation, 2% of dissociation, who knows, depends on the nature of the solute. If it is strong electrolytes like salts and strong acids, strong bases, etc., 90-95% dissociation might have happened. So that is a stronger equilibrium. Otherwise, for weak electrolytes, 20%, 10%, 2%, whatever the case might be. Now, before dissociation. So before even dissociation has happened, when I took the substance, assume I am starting with 1 mole for my understanding, because alpha value will be maximum 1. 1 mole I started with, and it became, there was 0 moles of A, means particles were not divided or broken, right? Then after dissociation, assuming alpha is the degree of dissociation, since alpha is a fraction, I am assuming initial to be 1. Now alpha fraction is dissociated, means how much is left out? 1 minus alpha will be left out. Please understand, because maximum value of alpha could be 1. Now when alpha is less than 1, if I assume the number of moles itself is 1, 1 minus alpha would have been left out because alpha has dissociated. Correct? Huh? Number 2, how much of particles are formed? See, 1 mole would have given n moles. Here alpha moles have dissociated, so n alpha moles would be formed. Clear? I repeat. I am assuming I have started with 1 mole of this solute, and initially before dissociation there will be no particles after dissociation, means dissociated particles, result of dissociation particles are nil. Now assume alpha moles have dissociated out of 1, then An will be 1 minus alpha left out, and for every 1 mole n moles are formed. That's why for alpha moles n alpha moles would have formed, so n alpha moles of this would be there. Therefore total number of particles at equilibrium, which means after completion of dissociation. What do I mean by at equilibrium? After completion of dissociation. Attaining equilibrium means process is completed. Will be equal to the undissociated particles are 1 minus alpha and the dissociated particles are n alpha. 1 minus alpha plus n alpha. Now what is I value? Number of particles after dissociation divided by number of particles before dissociation, right? Okay. Now number of particles after dissociation are 1 minus alpha plus n alpha. So I will write it as 1 plus n alpha minus alpha divided by number of particles before dissociation, we assumed it as 1. Therefore I can say I is equal to 1 plus n alpha minus alpha. I will take alpha common. Then what happens? 1 plus n minus 1 into alpha. 1 plus n minus 1 into alpha. I will bring 1 this side. Then I minus 1 will be equal to n minus 1 into alpha, or alpha is equal to I minus 1 divided by n minus 1, where you can tell alpha is the degree of dissociation, I is the Van 't Hoff factor, and n is something you want to understand. N is number of particles formed by dissociation per particle. Means in case of KCl, n will be 2. In case of calcium chloride, n will be 3. In case of calcium phosphate, n will be 5, and so on. So substitute n value here. I value where from you will get? From the colligative properties. You determine, see, by determining the colligative properties, you have a new formula for colligative properties now. What is that? Say for example, delta Tv you talk about. Delta Tv is equal to I into Kb into m, right? Now I determined delta Tv, I determined Kb, I had molality. Now you find out I is equal to delta Tv divided by Kb into m. So I will be determined from experimental results, and n will be known theoretically. You know how it dissociates and how many particles it forms. Then degree of dissociation can be calculated. Alpha is equal to I minus 1 by n minus 1. Very, very, very important formula. Now you may get questions two ways. One is, they'll give you all the experimental details required from a colligative property from a colligative property experiment, and they will ask you degree of dissociation. Then from colligative property experiment find out Van 't Hoff factor, means he would have given you everything. Logic is simple here. If you have a question in which Kb and molality are given and delta Tb is asked, then he is not worried about association or dissociation. He is theoretically considering no association, dissociation, asking you delta Tb, that's all. Any colligative property for that matter. Whereas he gave you Kb, he gave you M, he gave you delta Tb also, then he is trying to talk about Van 't Hoff factor, obviously. So when you read the question itself, you will understand what they are trying to ask you. So from this experimental value, you will find I. Then from theoretically what solute he has given, and if it dissociates, how many particles it might form, you will know. That you will substitute in the place of N and you will find alpha. If experimental information is given, alpha is asked. Whereas if alpha is given, Van 't Hoff factor is asked. Task is easy. If alpha is given, Van 't Hoff factor is asked, then place in the place of alpha, N you will know theoretically, cross multiply and get your answer. Clear? So this is the relation between degree of dissociation and Van 't Hoff factor I. Degree of dissociation alpha and Van 't Hoff factor I. On similar grounds, we should understand the relation between degree of association and Van 't Hoff factor I. Degree of association also we will take the symbol alpha, but the approach will be different. Okay. Now again, I can define degree of association. I can define degree of association alpha as number of particles associated, means if I added 100 particles to the solution, how many involved in association, divided by total number of particles added. Number of particles associated divided by total number of particles added, means out of billion molecules, say 3/4 of them involved in association, 1/4 of them did not. Likewise, okay, that is alpha, degree of association. Now I can show association the reverse manner. How? There were n particles of the solute, and all the n particles become one particle AN. This is association. And the reverse process where AN could become n moles of A could be dissociation. Like for example, in acetic acid, two particles of acetic acid are becoming 1. So here n is 2. Are you understanding that right? Okay. Now, before association, assume I started with 1 mole of A. Like I took 1 mole of acetic acid solution. I dissolved 1 mole of acetic acid in the solution per liter, per half liter, whatever it could be. So I started with 1 mole say. Initially, because there is no association happening, it will be 0. Then let degree of association be alpha. Means for every 1 mole, alpha moles will be undergoing association. That is the meaning. That means after association, alpha are undergoing association. 1 I have started with, so 1 minus alpha left unassociated. Point number 1 to be noted. Number 2 to be noted. In every particle, n times its number will be reducing. Suppose I can take example and explain you. Say 2 moles of acetic acid is becoming 1 mole, right? That means number of particles are 2. 2 particles are becoming 1. 2 particles are becoming 1. That means how many times it is reduced? Here it is 2. Here we took this value as n, right? That means if I start with 1 by 2 is the number of particles left out, because if I start with 2 particles, I am left with 1 particle. That means if I am starting with 1 particle, I am left with half particle. That means number of particles with which we have started divided by n particles will be the particles formed after association. Hope you understand that. That's why alpha particles have involved in association, so I will be left with alpha by n particles after association here. So the products of association will be alpha by n if from reactants alpha particles have involved in association. So from reactant molecules, out of 1 alpha have involved in association, so 1 minus alpha are left. And from products alpha by n will be formed, so at equilibrium alpha by n will be left. So total number of particles at equilibrium will be equal to 1 minus alpha plus alpha by n. Okay, now as usual, I is equal to number of particles after association divided by number of particles before association, right? Now before association I assumed 1 particle, after association I will write it like this, 1 plus alpha by n minus alpha. After association that much is left out. Therefore I is equal to 1 plus alpha by n minus alpha, and I am going to take LCM for alpha by n minus alpha. So 1 plus n will be there, n ones 1 alpha is alpha minus 1 n's n alpha minus n alpha. So I can write it as I is equal to 1 plus alpha minus n alpha by n, right? Now let me bring 1 this side. I minus 1 is equal to alpha minus n alpha by n. Let me bring n also this side. I minus 1 into n is equal to. Now from alpha and n alpha I will take alpha common, 1 minus n into alpha. Therefore alpha is equal to I minus 1 into n divided by 1 minus n. I minus 1 into n divided by 1 minus n. So I will write for degree of dissociation. What was the formula you got? Alpha is equal to I minus 1 by n minus 1. For degree of association, the alpha is I minus 1 into n by 1 minus n. Now, whenever required, derive like this. Or if you are strong at memory, memorize this. See, logically you are good, memory wise you are poor, then understand the concept, derive whenever you want. Logically you may confuse, but memory is good, then try to memorize. And I would suggest the first one, because I am very poor at merely memorizing the formulae. I need to draft them, I need to draw them, I need to work out and get it. It is your comfort. Let us see what's your comfort, not an issue. Okay. Now you are left with these two formulae. Again, like I explained in this case, here also they may give you all the experimental information for a given colligative property value and all the other values required to calculate it. Then from that you will calculate I value. I is equal to delta TV by KB into M, or delta TF by KF into M, or I is equal to RLVP divided by XB, or I is equal to pi divided by MRT. Using those informations you calculate I. Then number of particles is here n is, please understand n here, you must have understood already here, n is number of particles entering into association for forming one particle. Please understand, here n means one particle dissociating into how many particles. Here n means how many particles are associating to form one particle. Reverse. For example, in case of acetic acid, n is 2. Suppose there is a trimer formation, n will be 3. There is a tetramer formation, n is 4. There is a pentamer formation, n is 5. So simple. One molecule breaking into 2 particles, n is 2. Breaking into 3 particles, n is 3. Breaking into 4 particles, n is 4, and so on. Clear? Understood? Now, time to solve questions to get experience in these relations. Okay? Students, there are 2 exercises below Van't Hoff factor in your EPL. One is a theoretical exercise, learning exercise 2.8. The other one is a numerical exercise, entrance corner 2.7. Let us solve one by one. Theoretical exercise, just qualitative questions, very popular in entrances. Numerical exercise tests your numerical ability as well as conceptual ability, by the way, but these are merely conceptual ability. Let us check. See, sucrose, urea, glucose and sodium chloride, 4 solutes are given and arrange them in the increasing order of osmotic pressure, he said. Now you see, whenever such questions are asked, if there is a possibility for dissociation and more number of particles are formed, the one which produces highest number of particles shows highest value of osmotic pressure, because colligative properties are directly proportional to number of particles. Now, as long as he is asking a qualitative question, we don't worry about the degree of dissociation. Please understand. We assume 100% degree of dissociation. So we will think that each particle can give 2 particles. So if I have 1 mole, I would have got 1 moles. If I had 5 moles, I would have got 10 moles. And if I got 1 mole, I would have got 2 moles of particles. If I gave 5 moles, I would get 10 moles of particles. That's what I assume and proceed. I do calculation accordingly, comparison accordingly. Here, sucrose, urea, glucose, all the 3 are non-electrolytes. So they don't undergo any dissociation. That's why their concentration alone should decide who shows the highest osmotic pressure. Whereas this one, sodium chloride, dissociates to form 2 particles, sodium cation, chloride anion. So its concentration should be doubled to get the number of particles. Simple. Then compare the number of particles, whichever has the highest number of particles shows the highest osmotic pressure. Here he wants increasing order, so lowest to highest. First let us quickly calculate. See here, already for everything he said per liter, so only thing I need to calculate is number of moles. I will get molarity, right? Osmotic pressure is directly proportional to molarity. Okay, now for sucrose, 34.2 divided by molar mass comes 342. You can cross check. So it is 0.1 molar. And number of particles also will be 0.1 molar. Nothing new, because extra no dissociation happening. Urea, 60 grams per liter he said. Molar mass also is 60. That means 60 by 61. So 1 molar. And number of particles also will be 1 mole of particles per liter. 0.1 mole of particles per liter. Here also 1 mole of particles per liter, because it doesn't undergo any association or dissociation. Then glucose, 90 divided by 180 will be the molar mass of glucose. So you are getting 0.5 molar, and number of particles also will be 0.5 mole particles, because there is no dissociation but for glucose. Then sodium chloride, molar given mass is 58.5, molar mass is 58.5. So 1 molar, and by the way, it undergoes dissociation. Each one forms 2 particles. That's why molarity is 1 molar, number of particles formed will be 2 mole particles, because it undergoes dissociation. Now, the one with least number of particles will show least osmotic pressure. You want increasing order. Least is this one. So I can take A less than, second lowest is this one, glucose, which is C. C less than, third lowest will be B, and highest will be D. So A less than, C less than, B less than, D will be your answer for the increasing order of osmotic pressure. Repeat. I found number of particles. First I found concentration for each, and concentration is multiplied by the number of particles produced by dissociation. In case of these three non-electrolytes, that is solutes, number of particles per dissociation is no dissociation, so number of particles will be 1 only. So molarity is equal to number of particles. Here I multiplied by 2. Then compare the particles. The one with least number of particles will have least osmotic pressure. The one with highest number of particles will have highest osmotic pressure. That is your question number 1 from learning exercise 2.8. Let's go to question number 2. Again, before solving question number 2, let me confess we are assuming 100% dissociation here, theoretically. Assuming that he is asking which of the following 4 salts out of aluminum sulfate, sodium chloride, sodium sulfate and aluminum nitrate shows same value for Van 't Hoff factor as potassium ferrocyanide. It is a coordination compound or complex compound named as potassium ferrocyanide. Now logic is simple. Van 't Hoff factor depends on the number of particles produced by dissociation, because Van 't Hoff factor is equal to number of particles after dissociation divided by number of particles before dissociation. If I started with one particle, how many particles it will produce? Whichever produce, how many ever particles this produces, same number of particles the answer should produce. That will have the same value for Van 't Hoff factor. Correct? Now, see, these coordination compounds or complex compounds are the compounds in which one of the ion will be a complex ion. That means the species present inside the complex ion do not ionize separately. The whole complex ion ionizes independently. That's why it is kept in a square bracket. So here, and what is in square bracket is called coordination sphere. What is out of square bracket is called ionization sphere. Means this undergoes ionization, this whole thing undergoes separately. That way, if you say potassium is an alkali metal, you know that its oxidation state is +1, you know that. And how many potassium ions are there in this substance? 4. So 4 moles of potassium cations are formed per mole of potassium ferrocyanide. Now tell me, if positive charges are 4, then on this complex ion, how much negative charge must be there? 4 units of negative charge. So it forms 1 mole of ferrocyanide which has 4 units of negative charge. So ferrocyanide anion formula is FeCN6 taken 4 minus. That means every mole of potassium ferrocyanide gives 4 moles of potassium cations, 1 mole of ferrocyanide anion, total 5 moles. Now out of this, whichever answer gives you total 5 moles is your answer. I hope it is there in option A only, because aluminum sulfate gives 2 moles of aluminum cations and 3 moles of sulfate anions. 2 plus 3 total 5. So this is your answer. But let us rule out the others. Sodium chloride gives 1 mole of sodium cation and 1 mole of chloride anion, only 2 moles. Doesn't match. Sodium sulfate gives 2 moles of sodium cations and 1 mole of sulfate anion, total 3 moles. Doesn't match. Aluminum nitrate gives 1 mole of aluminum cation and 3 moles of nitrate ions, NO3 minus 1, total 4 moles. Doesn't match. So aluminum sulfate shows Van 't Hoff factor same as the potassium ferrocyanide, K4FeCN6. That was your question number 2 from learning exercise 2.8. The remaining questions of the exercise are very quick and easy learners, because we have already discussed a lot about them. So let us quickly finish them. See, potassium sulfate is prepared with 4 different concentrations: 0.1 molar, 0.01 molar, 0.001 molar and 0.001 molar. Then in which concentration the I value, Van 't Hoff factor value would be highest, he is asking. We have discussed it enough if you remember. So the answer will be 0.001 molar. As dilution increases, interionic interactions decrease and dissociation approaches 100%. When dissociation approaches 100%, Van 't Hoff factor value also increases. Just now I gave you a similar example. Sodium chloride, 0.1 molar shows a Van 't Hoff factor of 1.87, 0.01 shows 1.94, 0.001 shows 1.97. That is closest to 2. If it is 100% dissociation, it would be equal to 2. Likewise, potassium sulfate, if it is 100% dissociation, I would have been 3, because it dissociates as 2 moles of K plus and 1 moles of sulfate. So I would have been 3, but it will be slightly less than 3. And it will be closest to 3 in this concentration, a little far away from 3, more far away from 3, farthest from 3. So as the concentration increases, Van 't Hoff factor decreases. Clear? Farthest lower value from 3, that you please understand. Moving on. Glucose and sodium chloride, both 0.1 molar solutions are taken, which shows higher boiling point. See, elevation in boiling point is a colligative property. Means more the number of solute particles produced, more will be the elevation. And that solution will have more boiling point, obviously, because both must be dissolved in water. So water generally has a boiling point 373 Kelvin. Now because of dissolution of NaCl, boiling point would have increased much because it produces two particles, whereas this produces only one particle because glucose does not undergo any dissociation. That's why aqueous solution of sodium chloride shows more boiling point than the aqueous solution of glucose. Clear? That is second. Then question number 5. Why delta TF for sodium chloride is nearly twice to that of urea? Both are 0.1 molar. Again the same thing. This produces two particles per particle. This produces only one particle per particle, urea. Only one particle per particle because this doesn't dissociate. More the number of particles, more the value of colligative property. That is depression in freezing point. Here I want to give you a small warning. Better we would have included such questions, you will get it later. See, depression in freezing point is a colligative property. Freezing point is not a colligative property. Now, when number of particles are more, decrease in freezing point is more. So, freezing point will be less. I repeat, when number of particles are more, decrease in freezing point is more. So, freezing point will be less. Now, sometimes what he will do, he will give you a set of species like this. Different concentrations are different non-electrolyte, electrolyte, etc. And he will ask you which has the highest freezing point. Now, be careful. The one with the least number of particles has the highest freezing point. So, write down carefully, note down carefully, number of particles is directly proportional to delta TF, but number of particles is inversely proportional to TF, that is freezing point. Means more particles, less freezing point because freezing point is depressed. More particles, more is the depression in freezing point. He is talking about depression in freezing point and sodium chloride will show more depression because of more number of particles. Okay. Lastly, another reason based question. Why question? Acetic acid, trichloroacetic acid, trifluoroacetic acid, delta TF order is lowest for acetic acid, highest for trifluoroacetic acid. Why? Again he is asking depression, not the freezing point. So, depression in freezing point will be highest for fluoroacetic acid, lowest for acetic acid. The reason is, you are going to learn this in aldehydes, ketones, carboxylic acids chapter, but still you know inductive effect. Let me explain that. See, strength of a carboxylic acid is decided by the weakness of this OH bond. Weaker the OH bond, easier to donate protons, so stronger will be the acid. Repeat, weaker the OH bond, easy will be breaking of OH bond, hence release of H plus becomes easy. The one which releases H plus readily is the strong acid. Now, for this OH bond to become weak so that it can break readily and release H plus, the polarity should be stronger such that electron should be pulled more by oxygen so that hydrogen becomes more and more electropositive. If hydrogen becomes more and more electropositive, losing it as H plus becomes easy. And for hydrogen to become more and more electropositive, electrons should be pulled away from hydrogen. For electrons to be pulled away from hydrogen by inductive effect, there should be an electronegative group or electron withdrawing group here. Now, fluorine is the strongest electron withdrawing group compared to chlorine. Chlorine, and here there is no electron withdrawing group. So, the one having no electron withdrawing group cannot lose H plus easily. The one with electron withdrawing group can lose it easily, and stronger electron withdrawing group can lose it more easily. That's why this is strongest acid. Being the strongest acid produces more number of particles. When it produces more number of particles, delta TF value also will be more. Now when delta TF value is more, the freezing point order will be acetic acid greater than, trichloroacetic acid greater than, trifluoroacetic acid. Please remember this very clearly. So, depression in freezing point will be highest for trifluoroacetic acid because it is the strongest acid, produces more number of particles. Depression in freezing point is a colligative property, more the number of particles, more the depression. Because depression is highest, freezing point will be lowest. Because depression is lowest, freezing point will be highest for this. So, please read the question carefully, especially in entrances objective questions. Please read the question carefully and check whether he is asking depression or he is asking the absolute value of freezing point. If it is absolute value, inversely proportional to number of particles. If it is depression, directly proportional to number of particles. There ends your learning exercise, rather an easy one. Now let us go to entrance corner 2.7. Okay. The first numerical from entrance corner 2.7. 0.5 grams of potassium chloride is dissolved in 100 grams of water, and there seemed to be a depression in freezing point by 0.24 degrees, because freezing point has become minus 2.24 degrees. From 0 to minus 0.24 is nothing but 0.24 degrees delta TF. Kf is equal to 1.86 degrees Celsius kilogram per mole. Now he is asking degree of dissociation. While doing the derivation itself, I have told you, using all the experimental values, we will be finding I value. Now you see, if the formula was merely delta TF is equal to Kf into M, he has given you all the information required to calculate molality, and he has given you Kf, then you should have calculated delta TF. He has given delta TF also. That means you need to calculate I. So, first step involves calculation of I. I is equal to delta TF divided by Kf into M. This you calculate. Then in second step, you calculate alpha. Alpha is equal to, because it is dissociation, alpha is equal to I minus 1 by N minus 1. I you are getting in the first steps, you will be substituting here. Then what about N value? You know potassium chloride dissociates to form K plus and Cl minus. That means 1 mole of potassium chloride gives 1 mole of K plus and 1 mole of Cl minus. So totally there are 2 moles. So N value is equal to 2. Substituting N value, we will get it here. Okay. However, what were the options given? Sorry, I forgot to mark. Let me mark. See, look at the options. 36%, 92%, 48%, 69%. Now I am not doing any calculation. I have explained you how to do it. But I will not do any calculation. Tell me the answer. Observe the options and tell me the answer. You are absolutely right if you said 92% is the answer. Because you know potassium chloride is a salt. Salts are strong electrolytes. At a given concentration, because of interionic interactions, the dissociation may not be 100%. If dissociation were 100%, how much will be the I value? 2. And how much is the N value? 2. So directly, without even calculating I from this information, if it is 100% dissociation, 2 by 2 minus 1 by 2 minus 1, that is 1, alpha is 1, degree of dissociation will be 100%. So degree of dissociation of strong electrolyte is supposed to be 100%. But at any given concentration, due to interionic interactions, it may not dissociate 100%. That's why I value may not come exactly 2. But how will it come because it is a strong electrolyte? Very close to 2. It might start from 1.8. Yes or no? If you calculate, you will get to know it. That means the answer must be closest to 100%, right? How many options do you have closest to 100%? Over. You will get if you do it accurate calculations also. So please understand, as long as the options are such comfortable, as long as you see a strong electrolyte there, don't hesitate. That will be your answer. If you have any options like 85%, 93%, 98%, etc., then be careful. There is no choice. You have to do the calculation. But look at these options. That's why we got our answer already. But let me get you formally. Okay. See here. Delta TF happened to be 0.24. Divided by Kf happens to be 1.86. By the way, molality we need to calculate. I will calculate here and then substitute here. Molality is equal to potassium chloride 0.5 divided by the way, molality formula let me put. I don't know, some of you would have forgotten. Weight of solute by molar mass of solute into 1000 divided by weight of solvent in grams will be the molality. If you substitute here, weight of solute is 0.5 divided by weight of molar mass of solvent solute is 74.5, as we know already, into 1000 divided by 100. 100 will divide it 10 times, 0.5 into 10 will be 5. Let me substitute here. If I have to substitute, so molality will be 5 by 74.5. If I have to substitute 5 by 74.5, 74.5 goes up and 5 remains down. If you simplify this one after substituting molality here, you will end up getting N factor as 1.922. Whereas if it were 100%, you would have got this thing 2. Now as you can very clearly see, I need not even do this calculation. I can very clearly see it is very close to 2. That means answer must be close to 100%. Substituting here 1.922 minus 1 divided by, I already explained you that n is 2, 2 minus 1. 2 minus 1 is 1. So 1.922 minus 1 gives you 0.922. In terms of percentage means multiply by 100, you will get 92.2%. Easy. So if you are conceptually strong and if options are comfortable like this, no need to waste time by doing so much calculation. Please understand that. Let's proceed to question number 2. In second question, 6 grams of acetic acid dissolved in 50 grams of water and freezing point became minus 1.89 degrees Celsius. That means depression in freezing point is 1.89. Kf value is given and he is asking you percentage of association. Degree of association into 100. There is a theoretical error in this question. The theoretical error is that acetic acid undergoes dissociation in water, not association. So solvent he should have given it as benzene, not as water. Numerically we will get the answer assuming association and proceeding, not an issue. But theoretically that is the problem. Now again the question has two parts. The first part, begin with the ending if you think. The second part will be calculation of percentage of association. You remember that percentage of association formula is alpha is equal to I minus 1 into n by 1 minus n. Now how do we decide n value? You know very well acetic acid forms dimer. So 2 moles of acetic acid undergoes dimerization to form 1 mole, right? So 2 particles are becoming 1. 2 particles are becoming 1 means n value here is going to be half. Because the number of particles is reduced by half. 2 becomes 1. 1 becomes half. Half becomes 0.25. Likewise. So n value is half. 0.5. Now using that n value here, I value has to be calculated from here and to be proceeded. Now I can very confidently tell you the answer will be nearest to 100%. The reason, even I value, if it comes closer to half, then it is going to be 1 obviously. That let us calculate and check it, nothing wrong. Okay, see here. You want delta TF. Delta TF is equal to I into KF into M. So I is equal to delta TF by KF into M. Now I want molarity. First let me calculate molarity. I gave you the formula already. Directly I am substituting. Molar mass is 60. Given mass is 6 into 1000 by weight of solvent is 50. 60 will divide it 10 times. This 0 will cancel 2 zeros. 10 by 5. Okay. 1000 by weight of solvent. So 10 by 5 comes out to be 2. So it is a 2 molar solution. Now substitute it here. See, delta TF observed to be 1.89 divided by KF is observed to be 1.86 into molarity came 2. Now 1.89 and 1.86 are very close to each other. So I is 1 by 2, half. Now substitute here. N is half, we have already established. So half minus 1 into half by 1 minus half. You will get, see, here I have rounded off, I agree, 1.89 by 1.86 I have not done accurately. But I have already checked the options. Again, I forgot to write the options, but you see, there is only one option nearest to 100. You can check that. So if you simplify this one, you will end up getting 1. That means it is 100%. There was one option nearest to 100% for you, that is 98.4%. You can select that as your answer. He must have mentioned benzene. That was a theoretical mistake in the question. Let's proceed to question number 3. Another almost a direct question. See, Van 't Hoff factor is given, volume of solution is given, pi is given, temperature is given. R value, because pi is in atmosphere, R value we will take 0.0821 liters atmosphere mole inverse Kelvin inverse. Now what he needs is weight of calcium chloride. For getting weight of calcium chloride, what we need is molarity. So please observe. Pi is equal to I into MRT, I told you. Okay. Now, to get weight, I need concentration. So I need to find concentration, then finding volume is not an issue. Or because the volume is already in liters, in the place of M, I can substitute here itself. In the place of M, I into nRT by V I can write. So that I'll get number of moles. If I get number of moles, finding weight is not a big deal. Correct? So 0.75 atmosphere is equal to I value 2.47 into N, we need to find out, into R value, I told you 0.0821 liters atmosphere mole inverse Kelvin inverse is the R value when pressure is in atmosphere, into temperature 300 Kelvin divided by volume in liters is 2.5. Therefore, N is equal to 0.75 into 2.5 divided by 2.47 into 0.0821 into 300. Okay. Then you know very well 1 mole calcium chloride comes out to be 111 grams because calcium is 40, chlorine each 35.5, so total 71. So total comes out to be 111 grams. So 1 mole is 111, N moles will be N into 111, right? Therefore, for weight of calcium chloride, I can multiply this with 111. 0.75 into 2.5 divided by 2.47 into 0.0821 into 300 into 111. If you simplify this, whatever you get will be the weight of calcium chloride. Simplify and check. Okay. Simplify and check. You are supposed to get 3.42 grams as the answer. Okay. Solve it and confirm yourself. If you look into question number 4, another carboxylic acid is given, which is 2-chlorobutanoic acid. First, let me make it very clear to you. Any carboxylic acid in aqueous solution, that was the mistake in the first question. He gave a carboxylic acid, he gave aqueous solution but expecting association. No, it dissociates. And how does it dissociate? Carboxylate ion plus H plus ion. So, as long as it is a monocarboxylic acid, it gives only 2 ions. If it is a dicarboxylic acid like oxalic acid, succinic acid, etc., then that might give 2H plus 1 carboxylate, so it's going to be 3 ions. Similarly, a tricarboxylic acid gives 4 ions, tetracarboxylic acid gives 5 ions and so on. Since it is a monocarboxylic acid, it is going to give 2 ions, so N value is going to be 2 here. That is fixed. Now, he has given you weight of solute, he has given you weight of solvent, he has given you acid ionization constant, Kf value, and asking delta Tf value. First, I will mention step 2. That is what you need finally. Delta Tf is equal to I into Kf into M. This is the problem. For calculating molality, you have got weight of solute, weight of solvent, more than enough. Molar mass we can calculate, not an issue. So since you have weight of solute, weight of solvent, molality can be calculated, Kf is given. So to calculate delta Tf, what are you left with? I value. That I value, calculation of I value is the first step. Find I value, then substitute I value there, calculate molality and then substitute everything. Correct? Now, coming to I value. You know very well, alpha is equal to I minus 1 by N minus 1. To calculate I need alpha. And according to Ostwald's dilution law, if you remember, why I am taking up Ostwald's dilution law here? He did not give alpha directly, instead he gave acid ionization constant. So, alpha is equal to square root of Ka by C. This is the Ostwald's dilution law. Okay, where C is the concentration. So, here as well as here, to calculate either alpha or to calculate delta Tf finally, we need concentration. So, let us calculate molality first. Molality is equal to weight of solute 10 divided by molar mass of solute. 1, 2, 3, 4. You have 4 carbons. 12 fours are 48. You have 2 oxygens. 16 into 2, 32. You have 1 chlorine, 35.5, and 3 plus 2, 5 plus 1, 6 plus 1, 7 hydrogens, so 7. 5, 7 plus 5, 12, 12 plus 10, 22. Okay, 22. 5 plus 3, 8 plus 4, 12. So 122.5 is the molar mass. 122.5 into weight of 1000 divided by weight of solvent is given as 250. 250 will divide it 4 times and then simplify accordingly, means this is 40. 40 divided by 122.5. See, 40 would divide 120 exactly 3 times, but 122.5 would go slightly more than 3 times. Now 40 by 120 would have given you 0.33 molar. Here it will get slightly less than 0.33, so I can say 0.32. Now molarity is 0.32, Ka value is given as 1.4 into 10 power minus 3. So 1.4 into 10 power minus 3 divided by 0.32 something. If you simplify, you will end up getting 0.0655 molar. Now you got your molarity. 0.0655 is the degree of dissociation. Where am I? 0.32 was the molarity, substituting 0.655. Now you come here. N value is 2, 2 minus 1 is 1, so alpha is equal to I minus 1 because N minus 1 is anyhow 1, 2 minus 1. Therefore, I is equal to alpha plus 1, that is 0.0655 plus 1, 1.0655 is the I value. Now come here. Molarity we have already calculated 0.32. So 1.0655 into 1.86 into 0.32 molarity. If you simplify, you will end up getting 0.65 Kelvin as your delta TF value. Is that clear? So quickly, from the information of weight of solute, weight of solvent, and molar mass of solute, we calculated molarity. This was our step 1 actually, I am sorry. Then step 2 was using molarity, I found alpha value because he has given you Ka. So using Ka and C, I found alpha, and substituting alpha in the expression for alpha versus I found out I value. Then step 3, substituting I, Kf and M, I found out delta TF. Clear? That is question number 4. Let us go to the last question. If you look into the last problem, hope you have gone through it. 25 milligrams of potassium sulfate, very small quantity, dissolved into 2 liters of water at 298 Kelvin. And assuming potassium sulfate is completely dissociated, he is asking you to calculate the value of osmotic pressure. Now, potassium sulfate dissociates as 2K plus SO4 2 minus. That means 2 moles of cation, 1 mole of anion, so totally 3 moles. Now, if dissociation was less than 100%, then value of Bantoff factor would have been less than 3. But he is assuming you, asking you to assume 100% dissociation. That means I value will be 3. Now you want pi is equal to IMRT directly. I value we are substituting 3 into molarity, because the volume is given in liters. Directly I can take weight of solute by molar mass of solute into volume. Now weight of solute is given 25 milligrams, but we need it in grams because molar mass will be coming in grams per mole. So 25 into 10 power minus 3 is the weight of this thing. Then R value, because he needs answer in atmosphere, 0.0821 into temperature 298 Kelvin divided by weight by molar mass you have to take. Okay, weight by molar mass into volume you have to take. Molar mass of potassium sulfate. Potassium 39 into 2, I think you will get 78. Sulfur 32 into 1, 32. Oxygen 16 into 4, 64. 6 plus 8, 14, 7 plus 3, 10 plus 7, 174. So 174 is the molar mass of potassium sulfate into volume is 2 liters. See, if anybody has confused there, please don't confuse. In the place of molarity, I have taken weight of solute by molar mass of solute into 1 by volume. That is the formula of molarity, right? Because volume is given in liters. If it were in milliliters, I would have taken 1000 in the numerator. So, weight of solute 25 into 10 power minus 3 grams. Molar mass of solute 174. Volume of solution 2. Rest of the thing is RT. Simplifying it, you will end up getting, already 10 power minus 3 is there. You simplify the rest of the value, you will get 5.27 into 10 power minus 3 atmospheres. That was overall your solutions chapter, children. Now, if you start from session 1 to session 9, this one session 9, I started off with concept of solubility, and to teach concept of solubility, I started with a very school level fundamental, the constant particles of matter. Then after finishing concept of solid, and then I went to strength of intermolecular forces, which you would have studied in your first year. I elaborated that so that you will be understanding concept of solubility easily. Then the next concept was vapor pressure of solutions. Before teaching vapor pressure of solutions, I started off with the difference between boiling point and difference between boiling and evaporation. Then I defined boiling point for you, I defined vapor pressure for you, I gave factors influencing vapor pressure, I talked about vapor pressure of pure liquid, then only I went to vapor pressure of solutions. Likewise, at every instant, I started with a very fundamental and then went on building. I know for some of you, these concepts are too much because we went just like that. We made a leap from simple concepts to tough concepts, but still, if you follow all these 9 videos carefully, there is no chance you would not understand anything, because wherever required I went back to fundamentals. Even while teaching a concept, wherever I required I went back to the basic concept, which I must have taught yesterday or day before yesterday. Now, there will be no chemistry session on Friday because the chapter is finished now, and the full chapter will be there for the weekend test. I am leaving you the leisure for preparation. By the way, today you will have to solve home exercise 2.5, which contains numericals based on Van't Hoff factor. Then answer the exam corners, try to solve all home exercises which are done so far, and revise all the entrance corners learning exercises so that Sunday test you can confidently attempt. So this is the end of solutions chapter. See you sooner.